Genesis chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. And we're going to go down to verse 3. And Yahweh said to Abram, "Go forth from your land, from your kin, from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. The one who curses you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." The folks here and those who follow us on sermon audio, and later when this does get posted on Facebook, you may think this is an old sermon. David already preached from this text, and you'd be right on part of that. I did already preach on this text. We spent actually not one, but two sermons in this text just a few sermons ago. However, as I was going back over my notes and considering what was next, I realized that I really had not taken the time that I wanted to on the Abrahamic Covenant. And since this is a very important piece of not only Genesis, but Bible, I did not want to miss out on this. Not only is this a very important piece of the Bible, this is foundational to the rest of Scripture, but it's also a big part of some of the controversy of what's going on even in our day. Let's start talking about the Jewish people and the land and so on and so forth. A lot of that goes all the way back into Genesis, and shouldn't surprise us because a lot of the things that we talk about and we do and the things that we think about goes all the way back to Genesis. I mean, we've already considered some of that, like where does a wheat come from? Well, the answer is in Genesis. Why do people wear clothes? I'm glad we do, and I'm sure you're glad that we do too. And the answer to that goes all the way back to Genesis. Why is there sin and death and destruction and disease in our world? Well, the answer is in Genesis. Why is it that there's a little piece of land in the Middle East that's, by the way, only about half the size of Ohio, about the size of New Jersey, in the Middle East, that people are squabbling over today, a land called Israel? Why is that such a big topic in our world today? Well, it goes all the way back to Genesis. And so really, some of those questions and things, we can find the answers in our Bibles. When we look at the text before us, we did look at the centerpiece of this, and that is the coming Christ. Don't miss that. He is the promised seed, and there would not be a blessing when Yahweh says to Abram that you're going to be a blessing, and I'll bless those who bless you, and all. And he goes on. He says, "In you, all the families of the earth will be blessed." The reason for that is because of the coming Christ. So don't miss that. Don't miss that at all. This is the centerpiece of the promise that's given here. And that goes even further back to the Garden of Eden. And we looked at that and considered that piece. But there's more to this that we cannot miss. When we see the Old Testament promise of the seed of the woman, and we see the promises that are given of Jesus, we know that these things were fulfilled literally. And we thank the Lord for that. But why should we not believe that the rest of these promises would not be fulfilled literally as well? And indeed, I believe that they are or will be. They were or will be fulfilled literally. And so in this passage, there are primarily 5 key elements that we don't want to miss with this Abrahamic covenant that we find here. The first one is that Yahweh plans to make Abraham a great nation. A great nation. That nation would be Israel, formed through the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As we go through the book of Genesis, this will become clearer and clearer and clearer that that's who he's talking about. And so when he speaks of, "I'll make you a great nation," he's speaking of Israel, a nation formed through the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Number 2, Yahweh, God, declares that Abraham will be blessed and his name will be made great. Number 3, Abraham himself is destined to be a great blessing to others. And number 4, God promises the others to treat others according to how they treat Abraham and his descendants. Blessings to those who honor them and cursing to those who dishonor them. And then fifthly, ultimately, Abraham and the nation that arises from him will be a blessing to all the families of the earth. How this will be and how all these things will come to pass, that's not made immediately clear to Abram in this text. But as we read through the Bible, we find that all of this becomes clearer and clearer all the way through till eventually there will be a literal kingdom on earth set up by Christ himself, with Jerusalem being its capital, if you will. We're not going to go through all of the Bible to look at all this. That would take a series of sermons. However, I want us to just focus our attention in on the Abrahamic Covenant. And I want us to take a look at the fact that first of all, I want us to notice that this covenant is an unconditional covenant. Its ultimate fulfillment is guaranteed by God. It's independent of human effort or faithfulness. Personal participation in its benefits do depend on faith, but the covenant's full realization in all its dimensions is certain. Now, it's not until Genesis chapter 15 where the covenant is ratified. So let's go over there and take a look at this in Genesis chapter 15. I think it's important for our current study, and also because I really love how the translators have translated this. I believe we get the full picture here in this covenant here. Genesis chapter 15 and beginning of verse 7. Well, let's start with verse 1. After these things, the word of Yahweh, Genesis chapter 15, verse 1. After these things, the word of Yahweh came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not fear, Abram. I am a shield to you. Your reward shall be very great." And Abram said, "O Lord Yahweh, what will you give me as I go on being childless? The heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus." And Abram said, "Since you have given no seed to me, behold, one born in my house is my heir." Then behold, the word of Yahweh came to him, saying, "This one will not be your heir. One who will come forth from your own body, he shall be your heir." And he brought him outside and said, "Now look toward the heavens and number the stars, if you're able to number them." He said to him, "So shall your seed be." Then he believed in Yahweh, and he counted it to him as righteousness. And he said to him, "I am Yahweh, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess it." And he said, "O Lord Yahweh, how may I know that I will possess it?" So he said to him, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." Then he brought all these to him and split them into parts down the middle, and laid each part opposite the other, but he did not split apart the birds. Then the birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. Now it happened that when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, terror and great darkness fell upon him. Then God said to Abram, Know for certain that your seed will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. They will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will also judge the nation to whom they are enslaved, and afterward they will come out with many possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You will be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. Now it happened that the sun had set, it was very dark, and behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch, which passed between these pieces. On that day Yahweh cut a covenant with Abram, saying, To your seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenite and the Kenizzite and the Cadmonite, the Hittite and the Perizzite and the Rephaim, the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girgashite and the Jebusite. So this is where the covenant with Abraham is affirmed, the Abrahamic Covenant. And notice in verse 18, it says, On that day Yahweh cut a covenant with Abram. I love that. The way that the LSB, the Legacy Standard Bible translators, have that there in the translation. In fact, this is such a big deal They have in their translator notes, this is what they say about this. The phrase cut a covenant is a literal translation of the Hebrew phrase kareth brith. While many translations opt to gloss this phrase with a simpler rendering like made a covenant, a literal rendering with cut helps call to mind what a covenant at that time entailed. In the ancient Near East, covenants were ratified by the two respective parties cutting animals in two and then walking between the bloody severed halves. The significance of this practice is that each party is essentially saying that they may likewise be cut in two if they break their side of the covenant. The difference here is that Yahweh, presumably pictured in the oven and the torch, passed between the animal pieces alone while Abram was in a deep sleep. This established a unilateral covenant which Yahweh alone was responsible to keep. By God's grace, there was nothing Abram needed to do to keep the covenant in effect, nor was there anything he could do to jeopardize it. End quote. That's what was going on with the cutting of the animals and all of those things. This is what was happening, and this is why Abram was put to sleep and why Yahweh was involved in all of this. William Varner, one of the translators, posted this on a Facebook group some time ago, and I happened to grab it, stuck it in my own notes for such a time as this. He wrote, one contribution of the LSB is to recognize the nearly 24 times in the Old Testament where the Hebrew clearly says, cut a covenant. This expression goes back to Abram, who was commanded to cut animals in two, and Yahweh walked between the cut animals. The text says, on that day, Yahweh cut a covenant with Abram, saying, to your seed, I have given this land from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. Another example of this practice is the description of two men sealing a covenant by walking together between the parts of a calf in Jeremiah 34:18. The idea is that I may be cut in two if I break my covenant with you. The difference is in Genesis 15, Yahweh walked alone. It was a unilateral covenant. Nearly 24 times the two terms appear together in the Old Testament. Psalm 50 and verse 15 says, gather my holy ones to me, those who have cut a covenant with me by sacrifice. Let us not forget what this all pictures, because in the new covenant, it was inaugurated with the shedding of blood by one. You see, Jesus Christ, as he died on the cross, there was no agreement with us. You and I did not have some part in it. And in this, the Abrahamic Covenant, we see God's grace. As he cut the covenant with Abram. And the Bible is very, very clear here. Abram, you're asleep. God says to Abram, know for certain. Know for certain. And as he told him some things that would happen, gave him specific boundaries of the land and all that, said, your seed will be sojourners in the land that's not theirs. They'll be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. Well, when did that happen? Oh, we read of that in Exodus. Literally fulfilled. You see. We find this covenant reaffirmed in Genesis chapter 17, beginning at verse 1. Now it happened that when Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, so that I may confirm my covenant between me and you, that I may multiply you exceedingly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God spoke with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you. You will be the father of a multitude of nations, and no longer shall your name be called Abram. Your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations, and I will make you exceedingly fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings shall go forth from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant. An everlasting covenant. An everlasting covenant. To be God to you and to your seed after you. And I will give to you and to your seed after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. For an everlasting possession. You see that? For an everlasting possession. I will be their God. God said further to Abraham, now, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you, and your seed after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin. You shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. Every male among you who is 8 days old shall be circumcised throughout your generations. One who is born in the house, or one who is bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your seed, a servant who is born in your house, or who is bought with money, shall surely be circumcised. This shall be my covenant, your flesh for an everlasting covenant. But an uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Then God said to Abraham, as for Sarah, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and indeed I will give you a son by her. Then I will bless her. She shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a son? Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. But God said, no, but Sarah your wife will bear you a son. You shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his seed after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I will bless him, and I will make him fruitful and multiply him exceedingly. He shall become the father of 12 princes. I'll make him a great nation, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this season next year. So we see that the covenant was reaffirmed here in Genesis chapter 17. Over in Genesis chapter 26, Genesis chapter 26, verse 1, we find the Abrahamic covenant renewed with Isaac. Now, there was a famine in the land besides the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. And Yahweh appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt, dwell in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. You see that land again, that land which I swore to your father Abraham, I will establish the oath. I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven. I will give your seed all these lands, and by your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, my laws. And then furthermore with Jacob in Genesis 28, 10 through 17. Then Jacob departed from Beersheba, went toward Haran. He reached a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. He took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and laid down in that place. Then he had a dream, and behold, a ladder stood on the earth with its top touching heaven, and behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Behold, Yahweh stood above it and said, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your seed. Your seed will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, the north and to the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not forsake you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it. Throughout the scriptures, this covenant was known not only here in Genesis, but also in other places. It was known, taken literally, to be an everlasting covenant. In 1 Chronicles chapter 16, 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 15. Let's start with verse 14. He is Yahweh our God. His judgments are in all the earth. Remember his covenant forever, the word which he commanded for 1,000 generations, which he cut with Abraham in his oath to Isaac. Then he also confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as the portion of your inheritance. And so this was known to be an everlasting covenant. Over in Psalms 105, Psalms 105. They're in that 105th Psalm. Begin at verse 7. He is Yahweh our God. His judgments are in all the earth. He has remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded for 1,000 generations, which he cut with Abraham, his oath to Isaac. Then he confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as the portion of your inheritance. And so all of this tells us that these men, these Old Testament saints, they understood this to be a literal covenant that was given to Abraham, a literal land promise covenant, everlasting covenant that included land promises. This is a big deal for Israel, but it's bigger than Israel. You see, Yahweh was not just giving to these people, to Abram and his descendants, a piece of real estate so that they could have a place to live and live out their days, a place that they could be buried, and that was it. This was bigger than them. And even we've read, many of us, we've read the entire Bible. We know it's bigger than them. But even in the Old Testament, there's indication of that. Over in Genesis chapter 18. Genesis chapter 18 and verse 18. When Yahweh was about to destroy Sodom, and he said, should I conceal from Abraham what I'm about to do? Verse 18, he says, since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Bigger than Abraham, bigger than Israel, you see. Over in chapter 22, verse 18, in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have listened to my voice. I'm talking to Abraham there. He said, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Chapter 26 and verse 4. I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven. I will give your seed all these lands. By your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Abraham was a blessing to the world, and God, Yahweh says, hey, I'm going to multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and I will give your seed all this land, and by your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Chapter 28, verse 14. Again, there in Jacob's dream, your seed will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north, to the south, and in you and your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So in this Abrahamic covenant had great things for Israel, but it was bigger than Israel. In this, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. It wasn't just about them, was it? It was about the whole world. Yes, they had land promises. Yes, there were specific place names given. You'll have this from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates and so on. So those are specific things we can find on a map. God gave that to them. But there are blessings for the whole world. How do we reconcile all of that? Some take this and say, well, the promises that were given to Israel have been passed on to us, to the church, and so on and so forth. But I don't believe that's the truth. Mark it well, though. Both Israel and the Gentiles are related to the Abrahamic covenant because of Jesus Christ. But understand something. We keep our ethnic identities. Go with me, if you will, to Isaiah chapter 19. Isaiah chapter 19. Isaiah is writing about a future time, a prophecy that's not yet been fulfilled. And in here he says in verses 24 and 25, he says, in that day Israel will be the third party with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom Yahweh of hosts has blessed, saying, blessed is Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. You see, this future time that's not yet been fulfilled, he lists these nations: Egypt, Assyria,